spending more than ever before on travel, average trip costs surpassing $7,250 per trip in Q1 of 2026. However, demand for cancel for any reason, the only traveler insurance that benefits those cancellations outside of like the covered things rose. People buying travelers insurance rose by 29% in Q1 of 2026, all-time high. Airbnb's reserve now, pay later is fueling a lot of the consumer being comfortable booking some of these properties, knowing that they can get a refund or cancel that if they need to. Refunding guest policies, Josh, I'm gonna come to you for some of this stuff on the refunding and understanding cancellations on how to prevent and handle them with self-managing. But people are paying more for vacations. Get them. Do we pay? As we're getting them to pay more, are they expecting and willing to pay more, as long as it sounds like if there's some flexibility with what's going on? We always, I've talked about this in the past a little bit, is a policy that we've had on our short-term rentals for quite some time now. And it's the only, I don't know anybody else that does it. Maybe more people are since I've talked about it. And definitely more people should think of it when you start to see stats like this, is we have like hotel room type cancellation policies. They can cancel within 24 hours of book. And so they don't even need the travel insurance. They don't even need to do that. And so what we believe is it gives us a competitive advantage. And this is validating that hypothesis that gives us a massive competitive advantage, because the consumer is saying, I mean, they're spending 29% more in Q1 of 2026 on cancellation insurance. But also, how are we as hosts going to, one, do what I'm doing and try to use it to my advantage and as a competitive advantage by allowing it and offering 24-hour cancellations to our guests, because I want them to feel comfortable booking with us. Or two, what are we doing when, like, to try to say, okay, if I know the consumer is thinking about canceling, they're buying this extra insurance, how does that cover me and how does that help me as well, right, with our stuff? But we know from the consumer, if we offer them the ability to cancel, they can cancel, right? But as a host, cancellations, refunds, how does that affect my rankings, my host reputation on the Airbnb, or like on Airbnb and Vrbo? Josh, I know that you know a lot about this, so I'm going to have you pipe into that side of it.
Yeah. One, don't tell them my secret, Sean. Right. That's why I win. That's why I do so well. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I'll give you an example. So, we leave our cancellations super flexible, right? In the peak season months, we have it set at 5 days, right? And you're talking July 4th. I mean, you can cancel 5 days out. We are desirable enough of a property that we are not worried about that rebooking, right? At the end of the day, if I look back at all of 2025, because I looked at this and I started looking back to make sure, last year we lost 2 days during the peak season. Right. And if someone basically canceled last minute, we booked 5 of the 7 days back, and the 2 days we lost were like a Sunday, Monday. Right. But we were able to charge higher rates because the consumer is like, hey, I'm comfortable paying this. I'm comfortable booking it because if something changes down the road, I don't want to lose out on this property. But if something changes down the road, I'm not stuck. I'm not beholden to it. Right. And I know I can get booked. Now, if you have a larger property, I do think maybe you should have a longer window. If you got a 7-bedroom, 10-bedroom, something like that, and you make 95% of your money from Memorial Day to Labor Day, I'm okay having a more strict policy there in those type of markets in that situation. That should be a property by property analysis. But in general, if you give the consumer more flexibility, they're willing to give you more money. Right. And so I can charge, if I look at my May calendar right now, which I pulled it up right before we got on this recording. If I look at my May calendar right now, and May is in like this recording to be released on the 29th, right? So it'll be like 2 days, right? My May, every Monday through Friday is booked. Every single one of my weekends, except for one of them, is wide open. Right. So initially, if you saw that, you'd be like, that's not good, Josh. That's really bad. You know what I see is in my market, which is Hilton Head, May is a slower month typically, right? So you got this right after all the spring breaks are done. It's right before summer break starts, right? You got a little bit of a doldrum there. I have all of my hard days to fill are already filled. All of my easy days to fill are still open because my prices are so high, and I'm going to keep them high because I guarantee every single one of those weekends is going to book, right? And I'm going to be the only person in my comp set with a fully booked competitive calendar. right?
Yeah.
Because I left it available. I pushed the prices where it made sense, right? And I leave the cancellation there. I've had July 4th for me book and cancel twice in the last 4 months, right? I'm okay with that. It's going to book, right? And it's going to book at the highest rates of our entire resort by a wide margin, right? And it's not just because I said so. It's because we did all the things on the front end, from, designing a unique and immersive guest experience and marketing that unique and immersive guest experience to the correct target audience, right? And so we're comfortable with that process, and it's all about crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we say. Like, it's, we always say this is a game of 1,000 golden BBs, not one silver bullet. And that's just like when you mentioned, and where the policy is for us is give the guest as much flexibility as possible, make them feel as comfortable as possible. We just talked about a trust recession with our consumers out there, not trusting everything that marketers are throwing in front of them. Well, make it easy for them to cancel, make it easy for them to back out if they need to. We also know from consumer behavior and human psychology that once we make a commitment, we very much want to keep those commitments. And so whether I have to keep it or not is irrelevant, because naturally human behavior wants to keep commitments. It's why marketers ask you for micro commitments along the way all the time, right? When you actually get somebody to book your property, even though in the back of their mind, they're like, yeah, I'm going to book this one because I know I can get out of it, and it gave me a competitive advantage. The minute they book it, guess how many more properties those consumers usually are looking at? They're not. They're like, hey, listen, I'm locked in. I've got this taken care of. I found the right property. And even if they do, and they don't find something that is much different or unique or better, they're sticking with us, right? And so it's very rare that something actually, tragic happens, or something happens that the guest is not, like, has to back out, then they're not coming. And so, like, to your point, we have, like, maybe in a course of every single year, we probably lose out on 1 or 2 bookings because we have that policy, right? And it's usually on our smaller properties, we might not even miss out on it because it rebooks. On the larger properties, yeah, we might miss out on 1 or 2. How many do we gain? I don't know, because we already operate at higher than average nightly rentals. We already operate at higher than average occupancies for the markets that we're in. And so I don't know exactly how that equates to more bookings for us. But based on this, what I was just reading and seeing, that consumers are trying to protect themselves and they're willing to spend more money, but they're 29% of them are paying more for travelers and cancellation insurance. That's just in their pocket when they book a property like mine, because they don't have to do that. Right. I'm going to let them cancel anyways. So Josh, really quick on before we go to the next topic, I know as a host, if I cancel on a guest, it's bad for my reputation. I understand that. What about when a guest asks for a refund? Does that hurt me at all? If they cancel because they're not coming, not ask for a refund after they stayed and I've got a bad, my house wasn't cleaned or anything else. I'm saying they paid, they reserved my property because they were comfortable with being able to back out last second. Something actually happened and they had to back out and they asked for a refund. Does that hurt me as a host? Or is that beneficial to me as a host that I allow them to do that?
I would love to paint a pretty picture, but the reality of what I see, right? And so if I use a site like RankBreeze, right, or Price Labs Optimizer, and basically don't take it with a grain of salt, step back and look at the total data set in front of you. But realistically, is this? I've told you this. We've had July 4th book and canceled twice from people over different months, right? Both times that cancellation has happened, it's been within the cancellation window. We're still months away from that. We're fine with it, right? Right after that happened, I can go and I can see that I've dropped in the rankings a little bit, right? Because Airbnb's question, I'm assuming, is like, hey, was something wrong with this property? Why this person? Yep. But guess what happens? The second we pick up another booking, the second that Airbnb makes money off of us again, or we get a review, guess what happens? Shoot right back up, right? Yeah. And so we can see inflection points. What I would look at is trends, right? If I go back and look at a 90-day window and I see that I'm slowly falling, right? And my calendar's open. If your calendar's booked, it makes sense because you have no inventory to give. But if all things are being created equal and your calendar's wide open, check those inflection points. What did the fall start happening? And Sean, you and I were talking with a Vodyssey member a couple months ago who basically got a bad review on one property and it affected his other properties. Yeah. Right. And he didn't catch it. And it was like, hey, hey, this is, you got a 1-star review over here for something that wasn't your, it happens, right? It just horrible situation is what it is. But your other properties got hurt because you as the host, Airbnb is like, oh, wait a minute, is John Doe's property causing us issues? Let's take a step back on that. And so if we're playing in their sandbox, like you always say, we've got to play by their rules. And we need to understand the rules that they're judging us by. Basically, anything positive, you get bonus. Anything at all that loses them money, that's going to cost them money, you're having to send a refund for something, it's going to cost you rankings, right? And you can't be mad at that. I mean, we're playing on their platform. That's their rules. So we need to understand those rules.
Yep. Love it. Love that we touched on that, because there you go, the pros and cons, right? We talked about the advantages of having a policy like that. The disadvantages, if somebody does start to cancel, it can affect your rankings, and it can affect, them coming in. Now we feel like we get more business by offering it. You guys judge whether you want to, but based on this article, I would say the consumer very much appreciates it as well. And the consumer is willing to spend more money.